Hey, I'm Jimmy, and this is Philosophy for Everyday Life. So last time I talked about the definition of Stoicism provided by Immanuel Kant, and what I think is the most powerful insight of Stoicism. And today I'd like to return to Stoicism to consider three important reasons that Stoicism doesn't go far enough. I'm going to rely on Kant again for a few basic insights. So the first reason Kant says that Stoicism is inadequate is that it devalues human emotion. Kant says that Stoicism doesn't go far enough when it defines the moral life as a matter of overcoming one's passions or achieving apatheia. This is because passions or emotions, Kant thinks, are not bad in themselves. What would human life be without emotion? A completely emotionless life would be subhuman. So Kant says that our goal shouldn't just be to get rid of our passions, but to harmonize them with reason and with each other. Unlike Stoicism, Kant thinks that the goal of the moral life, or of moral development, or of acquiring virtue, shouldn't just be to get rid of emotions altogether, but to find a way of integrating them into one's overall life plan. Kant says that this kind of integration or harmony of all of our emotions with each other and with our overall life plan is what constitutes human happiness. So the first reason Stoicism is not enough is that it doesn't have an explanation for the positive and valuable role that emotions play in human life. And Stoicism doesn't really tell us how to integrate or harmonize our emotions into our lives considered as a whole. So in spite of the really powerful insight that Stoicism has about how we can actually be responsible for our actions and our moral dispositions, Kant is pointing out that it leaves out something really important in the emotions. Now, the second problem with Stoicism is that it underestimates the human propensity to evil. Stoicism says that when human beings lack virtue or do bad things, it's because they have been affected by their emotions. They have been too passive. They have failed to be rational and have allowed their reason to be sidelined by some irrational desire or impulse. But Kant argues that human beings are also capable of actively choosing evil, not just when their emotions get the better of them. Kant thinks we can actively choose evil using our reason. He writes, "Those valiant men, the Stoics, mistook their enemy, who is not to be sought in the natural inclinations, which merely lack discipline, and openly display themselves, unconcealed, to everyone's consciousness, but is rather, as it were, an invisible enemy, one who hides behind reason, and hence is all the more dangerous. They, the Stoics, send forth wisdom against folly, which lets itself be deceived by inclinations merely because of carelessness, instead of summoning it against the malice of the human heart, which secretly undermines the disposition with soul-corrupting principles." Now, this quotation is a bit dense, but Kant's point is that Stoicism believed the real enemy of human virtue was folly, or lack of control. But actually, he thinks the real enemy is human malice. Malice is when human beings use their reason to choose evil. It's when we have an evil will. Kant thinks that this choice is generally hidden. We cannot always detect it on the surface of human behavior. We might not even detect it in ourselves. So before we set to work on the passions, as Stoicism would encourage us to do, Kant says we first need to make a more fundamental choice to be a morally upright person. The mistake of Stoicism is the assumption, to return to the words of Kant, that the human being has an uncorrupted will. But this is not always the case. He says we must start rather by dislodging from its possession the evil which has already taken up position there. That is, the first really good thing that a human being can do is to extricate himself from an evil which is to be sought not in his inclinations, that is, his passions or emotions, but in his perverted maxims, and hence in freedom itself. In Kant's philosophical terminology, a maxim is a principle that a person uses to guide his or her behavior. So Kant is saying that sometimes human beings don't just let inclinations or emotions override reason. Sometimes they actually use their own reason to choose evil maxims. Let's go back to the brownie example from my last video to flesh this out. The Stoics would say that if I lack virtue, the only reason is that my inclinations, or desires, or passions, or emotions get the better of me every time I have the opportunity to eat a brownie. I have decided for myself that I want to be fit, and I know that the brownie goes against the goal I have chosen for myself. But my self-determination is not strong enough. I lack the freedom to resist my inclination to eat the brownie. For Stoicism, that type of weakness is what prevents a person from being virtuous. But Kant is saying something more than this. Kant is saying that I might actually have made it my principle or my maxim to choose to eat brownies whenever I can, even though I know that this will negatively affect my health. Or to take a more insidious example, Kant thinks it's possible that I might choose to cheat or take advantage of other people whenever I can get away with it. It's not just that on occasion I let my emotions get the better of me and steal a candy bar from the convenience store. It's that I can actually use my reason to make a conscious decision to take advantage of others. That is a possibility which Stoicism does not seem to have considered. The character of the Joker in Todd Phillips' 2019 film with Joaquin Phoenix illustrates the difference between Stoicism's idea of being affected or driven by circumstantial, psychological, or emotional factors outside one's control, and Kant's idea of malice. The Joker character, named Arthur Fleck, begins as a person whom the Stoics would say is full of pathos. Near the beginning of the film, Arthur asks his social worker to increase his medications, even though, as she points out to him, he's already on 7 medications.
All I have are negative thoughts.
Arthur is in a profound state of what Kant and the Stoics would call pathos or affect. He is determined by emotional and psychological factors outside his control. I don't mean by this at all to make light of mental illness, but part of what makes mental illness a problem for us is that it inhibits our ability to exercise agency in our lives. This is Arthur's experience. But over time, Arthur moves from a place of pathos to a place of malice. It is no longer just that he is affected by factors outside his control. Eventually, he chooses a settled response to those factors, which includes violence and a desire for revenge. Kant would say that Arthur has taken his desire for revenge, part of his pathos, in response to his circumstances, and turned it into a maxim. He has made a conscious act of self-determination. But he has not determined himself to act in accordance with what the Stoics would call reason or nature. Instead, he has determined himself to act according to a principle of violence and revenge. At this point, Arthur actually experiences a positive transformation. By choosing malice, he has actually taken responsibility for his life. But we can only describe the way he has chosen to take responsibility as evil. That choice to be responsible culminates in the murder of his mother and many others. Arthur, the Joker, relishes in his newfound freedom. But it is a freedom for evil, not for good. The Joker from Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight, played by Heath Ledger, expresses a similar malicious disposition when he says, "I'm an agent of chaos."
I'm an agent of chaos.
Stoicism, according to Kant, and I happen to think he's right, has no place for this type of evil. That is, Stoicism never considers the possibility of malice. It has no ability to describe malice and no prescription for addressing it. Stoicism's analysis of our moral condition is, for this reason, ultimately superficial. So that was the second reason that Stoicism doesn't go far enough. Now, the third reason Stoicism is inadequate is that it has no place for moral hope. It cannot deal with the apparent moral absurdity of situations in which virtue is punished and lack of virtue is rewarded. I'll have to explain what that means and why Stoicism cannot deal with this problem in my next video, so stay tuned. In the meantime, what do you think? Does Stoicism go far enough? Can it do justice to the role of emotion in human life? And can it account for the possibility that failure to be virtuous might be due not just to pathos or emotion, but also to an active decision against virtue? I'd love to know. Feel free to comment below, and if you'd like to continue the conversation, like this video and subscribe to my channel. Until next time, Carpe Diem.